Autumn in Riverside glows like an artist's dream. Brick cottages with copper mailboxes. American flags dancing on every porch, and the Willamette River stretching out like an endless mirror reflecting the October sky. Most tourists have retreated for the season, leaving our little corner of Oregon to breathe and settle back into itself. Everyone knows everyone in Riverside, though we pretend it's some metropolitan hub, just a cordial nod instead of long-winded conversations, and the never-ending competition of whose garden displays the most vibrant fall colors. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'd never participated in those gardening rivalries, so Miss Elisa Walker's request caught me completely off guard. Before leaving my small bungalow that Saturday morning, I examined my reflection, hazel eyes, 5-day stubble, and a faded flannel shirt that had definitely seen better days. Maybe today's an adventure, I muttered to myself, offering a self-conscious wink to the mirror before stepping outside. The river in the distance gleamed gold with the sunrise, as if approving of my decision to finally accept Ms. Walker's lawn request. Mornings on Willow Lane smell of pumpkin spice, fresh apple cider, and the earthy scent of fallen leaves. This particular dawn, the rumble of garden equipment woke me faster than any alarm could have. I'm Nathan, 32, the local carpenter and handyman. Though my boss, Mr. Lewis, jokes that I'm the town's resident fixer of all things broken. But this crisp Saturday, all I wanted was peace and quiet, not the orchestra of leaf blowers and hedge trimmers. Damn gardening, I grumbled, squinting. From my porch at the commotion, what did I do to deserve this symphony at 7 in the morning? My phone chimed with a text from Jason, my colleague at the woodworking shop, a picture of an ancient lawnmower plastered with a TurboCut 5000 sticker. Cut the grass, not your patience, the message read. Sarcasm was always Jason's preferred language. That's when I heard my name called across the street. Nathan Reed. It was Ms. Elisa Walker, retired literature professor and the undisputed queen of immaculate gardens on Willow Lane. At 53, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had weathered life's storms without losing her composure. Her auburn hair, streaked with silver, was pulled back in a loose bun, and she wore gardening gloves that looked brand new despite the soil covering them. Since you're just standing there watching the world go by, perhaps you could help a neighbor out. She gestured to her lawn with a trowel. I'd turned down her requests at least 6 times already. Her reputation for perfectionism was intimidating. I'd seen how she directed the professional landscapers she occasionally hired, sending them back repeatedly to fix invisible flaws. But something shifted in me that morning. Maybe the golden autumn light, maybe the need to prove I wasn't intimidated, or maybe just the desire to break my own routine. I retrieved my trusty but weathered Honda mower from the garage and crossed the street. At the white picket fence, Mrs. Bennett, our street self-appointed social media correspondent, watched with undisguised interest, smartphone in one hand and artisanal coffee in the other. Turn on that camera, Mrs. B, I called out with a grin. This should be quite the spectacle. Ms. Walker's lawn looked like velvet, not a dandelion in sight, not a single fallen leaf dared to rest on its surface. The moment I pulled the starter cord, she began issuing directives. Diagonal patterns, please, not straight lines. And set the blade height to exactly 2 1/4 inches. Her voice carried the same authoritative tone she'd likely used in her university lectures. Yes, ma'am, I replied, adjusting the settings. This was definitely going to be a long morning. First pass, acceptable. Second pass, nearly perfect. By the third, Ms. Walker had transformed into a meticulous director, pointing out imperfections invisible to the common eye. 1/4 inch by the hydrangeas. Back up and fix that section. Her eyes missed nothing. I bit my tongue, carefully repositioned the mower, and recut the strip. Then I paused to wipe sweat from my forehead despite the cool autumn air. You know, Ms. Walker, I ventured, your lawn deserves its own literary award. Perhaps most compelling grass in a supporting role? One elegant eyebrow arched upward, and for a moment I feared I'd overstepped. Then, unexpectedly, her expression softened, and a small chuckle escaped her lips. "The lawn is screaming, and you're making jokes," she replied, the corner of her mouth twitching. "I appreciate both precision and wit, Mr. Reed." That was the first crack in her composed facade. When I completed the third pass and the grass lay in perfect diagonal stripes, I noticed Ms. Walker standing closer, observing not just the lawn, but me as well. I cut the engine, and in the sudden silence, she asked something that left me momentarily speechless. "Day for dinner, Nathan. I'm tired of eating alone." The quiet that followed felt so thick that even the distant river seemed to pause its flowing. I laughed nervously, a bit rudely perhaps. "I'm sorry, She smiled slightly, a hint of vulnerability showing through her usually confident demeanor. "Don't look so alarmed. It's just dinner. After watching you work so diligently, the least I can offer is a proper meal. Besides," she added, gesturing to my old t-shirt and jeans, "you look like someone who survives on microwave dinners." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. My heart was still pounding from the unexpected invitation. I rubbed the back of my neck, uncertain how to respond. "Well, you're not wrong about the microwave dinners." My phone buzzed in my pocket. Jason again. Still. "Alive? Give me a thumbs up, or I'm calling emergency services." I raised a thumb in the air, and Mrs. Bennett immediately captured the moment with her camera. No doubt already composing a social media post in her head. During a water break, Ms. Walker and I stood on her immaculate porch. She handed me a glass of homemade lemonade with fresh mint leaves, the kind of thoughtful touch I'd expect from her. The cold tartness hit my parched throat like a blessing. "You've declined my lawn requests 5 times, I remarked, twisting the glass in my hand. "Why insist today?" "'Cause it's Saturday," she replied simply, though her eyes conveyed something deeper. "And sometimes Saturdays are when we should say yes to things we usually decline." In her gaze, I caught a glimpse of something I recognized all too well. Solitude. And not just being alone, but the kind of solitude that eventually becomes its own companion, both comforting and suffocating. A "yes, it is." Then I nodded. "On one condition, you stop directing me like I'm in a lawn care documentary, and I'll stop pretending I know what I'm doing." "Deal," she said, lifting her glass. "No." We clinked them together gently, like signing an unspoken contract. The mower, I worked in comfortable silence. Her comments gradually transformed from commands into suggestions, and the lawn stopped feeling like a battlefield and became a shared project. When the final stripe lay perfectly aligned, Ms. Walker stepped back to admire our work. "Flawless," she said with satisfaction. "Congratulations, Nathan. You're the first person to finish without me finding fault." I gave an exaggerated bow. "It's an honor to meet your exacting standards, Ms. Walker." She laughed again, more freely this time. Right then, a door slammed across the street. Mrs. Bennett, probably rushing to update the neighborhood Facebook group with her latest observations. As evening approached, I returned home to shower and change before dinner. The invitation still felt surreal. My small bungalow, inherited from my grandfather who had taught me everything I knew about carpentry, suddenly seemed emptier than usual. Its wooden beams and handmade furniture usually gave me comfort, but today they emphasized how solitary my life had become since moving to Riverside 3 years ago. After changing into a clean navy button-down and my least worn jeans, I crossed the street again. This time my toolbox was replaced by a bottle of reasonably priced Pinot Noir from a local vineyard. Ms. Walker answered the door in a simple emerald dress that complemented her auburn hair. Her home smelled of rosemary and garlic, a welcome change from the sawdust and varnish I was accustomed to. "Please, call me Eliza," she said, taking the wine. "Ms. Walker makes me feel like I'm still grading papers." Her house was exactly what I'd expected. Meticulously organized bookshelves lined the walls, filled with classic literature and poetry collections. Black and white photographs hung in perfect alignment, capturing landscapes from around the world. The furniture was elegant, but comfortable, each piece seemingly selected with deliberate care. "I hope you like roast chicken," she said. leading me to a dining room where the table was set with actual cloth napkins and what appeared to be real silver. "I'd eat cardboard if it smelled like whatever's in your oven," I admitted. As we ate, I discovered that Eliza had taught English literature at Reed College for 20 years before taking early retirement 3 years ago. She'd traveled extensively, lived in Paris for a year, and published 2 books of literary criticism. And now you're in Riverside, directing lawn maintenance like a film director, I observed, taking a sip of wine. "Life takes unexpected turns," she replied. "I never imagined myself becoming so passionate about proper lawn care, but after David died, I needed something to control." The mention of her late husband shifted the atmosphere. David Walker had been a respected architect, she explained. His sudden heart attack 5 years ago had left her adrift until she channeled her energy into creating order in her immediate surroundings. "The garden doesn't argue back," she said with a sad smile. "It just needs clear direction," I told her about my own journey, apprenticing with my grandfather, working for construction companies in Portland, and returning to Riverside after his death to take over his small carpentry business. "So we're both hiding in our own ways," she observed, refilling our glasses. "I'm not hiding," I protested. "I'm just simplifying," says the man who declined a simple lawn mowing request 5 times. She countered with a knowing look. The conversation flowed as naturally as the Willamette. We discovered shared tastes in music, classic jazz and folk, and a mutual appreciation for the quieter rhythms of small-town life. By the time we finished the bottle of wine, the initial awkwardness had dissolved completely. "Thank you," Eliza said as I helped clear the dishes. "Not just for the lawn, but for saying yes to dinner." Conversation makes food taste better. Standing at her sink passing plates between us, I felt a strange sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't romantic. The 21 years between us created a different kind of connection, but it was undeniably genuine. "Next Saturday," I said impulsively as I prepared to leave, "let me return the favor. I make exactly 3 dishes well, and you can choose which one surprises you the least." Her smile reached her eyes this time. I do enjoy a controlled risk. Walking back to my house under the stars, I noticed Mrs. Bennett's curtains twitch. By morning, the Riverside community page would undoubtedly feature speculation about the handyman and the professor. Strangely, I found I didn't mind. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Alive? Is dinner report needed?" I replied simply, "Alive. Lawn conquered." "She's interesting." "Interesting." "I'm getting popcorn," came his immediate response. He wouldn't be the only one following this unexpected development. Somewhere inside me, a spark of curiosity had ignited. Maybe it was simple friendship. Maybe it was the comfort of finding someone equally committed to their solitude, but willing to create a small opening. The lawn was perfect, and I suddenly realized that behind straight lines and careful patterns sometimes hide stories that can change your perspective. I fell asleep thinking that Sunday would bring new possibilities, and for once that thought felt more like anticipation than anxiety. Sunday arrived with gentle rain tapping against my windows. Forecast showed storm clouds gathered over the Willamette, replacing yesterday's golden autumn with steel gray. The air carried that distinctive pre-storm electricity, a mixture of ozone and wet leaves. I was in my workshop behind the house, applying a coat of beeswax to a cherry wood bookshelf, when my doorbell chimed. Eliza stood on my porch wearing a deep blue raincoat, her expression composed yet somehow tentative. Before I could speak, she delivered her characteristically direct question. "Do you play chess, Nathan?" "Chess?" I echoed, as if confirming I'd heard correctly. "Chess," she nodded firmly. "Because in approximately 15 minutes, we're going to lose power. And I have a perfect storm day chess set that's gathering dust." The first heavy raindrop hit the porch rail with a dramatic splat. The storm was definitely approaching faster than expected. I stepped aside and gestured for her to enter. "I haven't played since college, but I remember the basics," I admitted as she crossed the threshold. My house, a craftsman bungalow built by my grandfather in the 1970s, had always felt appropriate to me, modest but solid. with hand-carved details and built-in cabinets that showcased his skill. Today, with Eliza stepping inside, I suddenly saw it through new eyes, the bachelor minimal furnishings. The stack of woodworking magazines beside my reading chair, the unframed photographs tacked directly to the wall. Eliza moved through, my space with curious eyes trailing the scent of rain and something like lavender. She paused at my bookshelf, running her finger along the spines of my modest collection, mostly woodworking manuals with a few classic novels interspersed. Hemingway nestled between Advanced Joinery and The Complete Guide to Wood Finishing. She observed with amusement. An interesting literary sandwich. I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious about my sparse library. I prefer stories where things get built or fixed. As predicted, 15 minutes later the lights flickered and died as thunder rolled overhead. I lit the antique oil lamps my grandfather had kept for such occasions, bathing the living room in a warm, fluctuating glow. Eliza unpacked a carved wooden chess set, placing it on my coffee table. The pieces were beautifully crafted from ebony and maple. This was David's, she explained, setting up the board. He loved games of strategy. We played as rain hammered the roof, making the mugs rattle on my kitchen shelves. Eliza was a formidable opponent, as I might have expected from someone who approached lawn care with such precision. But chess revealed a different side of her, not just meticulous, but creative, taking unexpected risks with her knights. Check, she announced with quiet satisfaction after a particularly clever maneuver. I studied the board, searching for escape routes. Your bishop has been plotting against me for the last 6 moves. Literature professors understand the long game, she replied with a hint of mischief. We spend years watching characters make decisions that will clearly lead to their downfall. As our second game began, the power still out, I ventured a more personal question. Why did you really invite me to dinner last night? Her hands paused over the board. For a moment I thought she might deflect the question, but Eliza had never. Struck me as someone who avoided difficult truths, because after 3 years in Riverside, you're the first person who made a joke about my perfectionism instead of just being intimidated by it, she answered finally. And because eating alone, every night for 5 years gets tiresome, even for someone who appreciates solitude. She captured my pawn with a decisive click. Also, I saw you building that playhouse for the Henderson children last month. Anyone who puts that much care into a child's imagination deserves better than microwave dinners. I hadn't realized. She'd been watching me work. The thought was both unnerving and strangely warming. Your turn, she prompted, indicating the board. I moved my knight. Speaking of neighbors watching neighbors, Mrs. Bennet has probably already written the first chapter of our unauthorized biography. Eliza laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to brighten the storm, darkened room. Marjorie Bennet has been Riverside's unofficial chronicler since before I moved here. Last year, she wrote a detailed Facebook post about my decision to switch from rhododendrons to hydrangeas. Received 47 comments. The chess game stretched into the afternoon as the storm intensified. We paused for lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches made on my old camp stove, which Eliza declared surprisingly sophisticated for emergency cuisine. By our third game, the formality between us had dissolved further. She told me about her childhood in Boston, her early passion for Victorian literature, and her relationship with David, their meeting at a university fundraiser, their shared love of architecture and design, their decision not to have children, focusing instead on their careers and travels. In turn, I shared stories about learning. Carpentry at my grandfather's side, my brief, failed attempt at corporate life in Portland, and my return to Riverside after his death 3 years ago. I was running away, I admitted, something I rarely acknowledged even to myself. From a relationship that ended badly, from a career that felt hollow, from the feeling that I was building things that wouldn't last. Eliza listened attentively, her eyes reflecting the oil lamp's flame. And now you build things with your hands, things that will outlast both of us. That's the plan, I agreed. Though lately I've been wondering if I'm hiding rather than healing. Perhaps a bit of both, she suggested, capturing my rook. Check again. When the power finally returned at dusk, it felt almost like an interruption. The electric lights seemed harsh and unnecessary after hours of lamp glow and conversation. Lisa began packing up the chess set. "Thank you for the shelter and the company, Nathan." "Anytime," I replied, realizing I meant it sincerely. "Next time, I'd appreciate more warning before you predict a power outage." She smiled, tucking the chess set under her arm. "Next Saturday dinner is still on your calendar, I hope. Your 3 specialty dishes await judgment." "Absolutely," I confirmed. "Though I should warn you, 2 of them involve pasta, and the third is just the first one with different cheese." At the door, Eliza paused, looking out at the rain-slicked street. "I have an umbrella in my coat," she said, reaching into her pocket. Then she froze, her expression changing. "Oh no." "What's wrong?" "My reading glasses. I must have left them on your coffee table." I turned to check, but no glasses were visible. We searched the living room without success, checking under cushions and behind books. "I need those for work tomorrow," she said, genuine distress breaking through her usual composure. "We'll find them," I assured her. "Let me get a flashlight for better light." In the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Bennett. "Found something that might belong to your friend. Left it on your workshop doorstep." Sure enough, when we checked the back door, there were Eliza's glasses in a plastic bag protected from the rain, with a note, "These blew into my yard. Tell the professor her secret is safe with me." Eliza read the note and shook her head with a mixture of amusement and resignation. "There are no secrets in Riverside. It's only carefully documented observations," I added. As she prepared to brave the drizzle umbrella unfurled, Eliza turned back. "Chess was David's passion, not mine," she said quietly. "That's the first time I've played since he died. Thank you for that." Before I could respond, she was gone, a blue silhouette dissolving into the rainy evening. That night, as I lay listening to the storm's final murmurs, I realized something had shifted. My house no longer felt like a retreat from the world, but rather a space that could welcome others. I sent Jason a quick text before falling asleep. "Chess during power outage. She's full of surprises." His response came immediately. "Professor by day, chess master by night. Plot thickens." Indeed it did. Something was taking root between Eliza and me. Not romance in the conventional sense, but a connection that defied easy categorization. A friendship building across differences in age, experience, and outlook, like joining 2 different woods into something stronger than either piece alone. Monday morning dawned clear and freshly washed, the storm having cleared the air of autumn's dustiness. I was loading my truck with tools for a job across town when I noticed something on my porch, a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a paperback copy of The Old Man and the Sea, with a note tucked between the pages. "Since you appreciate stories where things get built or fixed, sometimes what needs repair isn't made of wood." Yeah, I smiled, tucking the book into my jacket pocket. The gesture felt significant. A literature professor sharing a carefully chosen story, building a bridge between our different worlds. At the job site, I found myself working with unusual focus, the precise measurements and clean cuts reflecting something of Eliza's influence. On my lunch break, I began reading Hemingway's sparse prose, finding unexpected resonance in the old fisherman's determination. That evening, after finishing work, I stopped at Riverside's small bookstore and purchased a volume of Mary Oliver's poetry. The next morning, I left it on Eliza's porch with a note, "For when the garden needs words instead of shears." And throughout the week, our casual exchange continued. A passage from Thoreau about craftsmanship appeared in my mailbox. I responded with a book on architectural history I thought she might appreciate. Each small offering felt like another piece of a structure we were building together, beam by beam, word by word. By Friday, Mrs. Bennett had clearly noticed our literary correspondence. Her curtains twitched with clockwork regularity whenever either of us approached the other's porch. That afternoon, a post appeared on the Riverside community page. "Culture flourishes on Willow Lane as books cross the street more frequently than traffic." I laughed when Jason forwarded me the post with a dozen question marks attached. The town's gentle gossip no longer bothered me. It seemed a small price to pay for the unexpected friendship blooming across the street. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn clarity, the kind of day that showcases Oregon's beauty in its most vivid colors. I spent the morning at the farmer's market, selecting ingredients for dinner with unusual care. Fresh pasta from the Italian couple who had retired to Riverside from Florence, heirloom tomatoes still warm from the vine, basil that perfumed the air when brushed against. As I was examining a wedge of aged Parmesan, a familiar voice spoke behind me. Seems like those 3 dishes might be getting an upgrade. Eliza stood there, a market basket over her arm filled with apples and what looked like a loaf of sourdough. Reconnaissance mission, I asked, gesturing to her basket. Supporting local agriculture, she corrected with a smile. Now I admit to curiosity about tonight's menu. We walked together through the market, stopping at various stalls, our conversation flowing as easily as it had during the chess match. Several townspeople observed us with poorly disguised interest, including Mrs. Bennet, who pretended to be deeply absorbed in selecting honey while clearly eavesdropping. Your fan club is growing, Eliza murmured as we passed an elderly couple who nudged each other at the sight of us. Our fan club, I corrected. You're the one with the literary reputation. I'm just the guy who fixes things. Sidelong glance. Sometimes the most important repairs aren't visible, Nathan. The comment stayed with me as I prepared dinner that evening. My small kitchen, usually a functional space where I assembled simple meals, became a workshop of a different kind. I took the same care with the fresh pasta that I would with joining pieces of walnut for a cabinet, focusing on details and timing. At exactly 7, Eliza arrived carrying a bottle of wine and a small potted herb I didn't recognize. Lemon time, she explained, placing it on my windowsill. Your kitchen needed something living. Dinner was served on my grandfather's handmade cherry table, usually covered with woodworking plans and mail, cleared it completely, and even found cloth napkins I didn't remember owning. So this is the legendary pasta? Liza asked, twirling. A forkful. Legendary might be an overstatement, I laughed. But it's several steps above my usual bachelor fare. As we ate, something remarkable happened. A simple house, which had always felt like a workshop with a bed attached, began to feel like a home. The conversation, the shared meal, the laughter, they filled the spaces between the beams and beneath the rafters, seeping into the very grain of the wood. You have a gift, Eliza said suddenly, looking around. Not just for carpentry, but for creating spaces that hold stories. I followed her gaze, seeing my grandfather's handiwork through her eyes, the carefully crafted moldings. The built-in bookcase with its subtle inlay, the window seats designed to catch the western light. I inherited the talent, I said. Grandfather built this place to last generations. And you're honoring that legacy, she observed, though perhaps it needs more books to balance all the sawdust. After dinner, we sat on my back porch with coffee, watching fireflies begin their evening dance over the garden. The moment felt suspended in time, neither of us rushing to fill it with words. Why did you leave Portland? Lisa finally asked. The real reason? The question penetrated deeper than I expected. I took a slow breath, organizing thoughts I rarely examined. I was engaged, I began, to an architect named Sophia. We met on a restoration project, this beautiful old Victorian that needed extensive woodwork repair. She had vision, energy, ambition. I was captivated by how she could look at a space and immediately see what it could become. Eliza listened without interruption as I explained how our relationship had developed and then gradually unraveled. She wanted to transform everything, the Victorian, her apartment, eventually my approach to carpentry. I was too traditional, too concerned with historical accuracy. She wanted innovation, adaptation. When my grandfather died and left me, this place, she saw it as an opportunity to start fresh, redesign everything. I gestured to the house behind us. But I couldn't do it. This place, these beams and doors and cabinets, they're his voice, his legacy. Modernizing it would have... It's been like erasing him, we argued. She took a job in Seattle. The admission hung in the evening air, more revealing than I'd intended. So you chose to honor the past, Eliza said softly, even at personal cost. I nodded, suddenly aware of the parallel to her own life, her meticulous garden maintaining. Patterns her husband had designed, her careful preservation of his chess set, her house likely unchanged since his death. We're both curating memories, I observed. You with your garden, me with this house. The question, she replied thoughtfully, is whether we're preserving or hiding. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Dinner. Success or pasta disaster? I showed the message to Eliza, who laughed. Your friend seems very invested in our friendship. Jason has appointed himself my social director, I explained. He thinks I spend too much time with wood and not enough with people. A wise assessment, she agreed. Though I'm hardly one to judge, given my own tendency toward solitude. As the evening wound down and Eliza prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Next Saturday is the Riverside Harvest Festival. Would you consider attending with me? As friends, she added quickly. I'd like that, I replied, surprised by how much I meant it. Watching her walk back across the street, illuminated by the streetlights, I realized our connection had become something I looked forward to, a bright thread in the fabric of my days. Whatever name one might give it, friendship, companionship, mutual understanding, it felt valuable and worth nurturing. Later I texted Jason, pasta success. Festival plans next weekend, his immediate response. Professor, taming the wild woodworker? Town gossips need oxygen masks. I smiled, setting my phone aside. Let them gossip. Something genuine was growing across Willow Lane. Something that defied easy labels but offered something we both needed, connection without expectation, understanding without judgment. As I drifted towards sleep, I realized I'd spent the evening without once thinking about what needed fixing or building. Sometimes the most important work happens when the tools are set aside. The Riverside Harvest Festival transformed our quiet town into a tapestry of amber lights, hay bales, and apple cider stands. For one weekend each October, Main Street closed to traffic, replaced by vendor booths, a makeshift stage for local musicians, and carnival games that had likely been in storage since the 1980s. I'd always appreciated the festival from a distance, usually stopping by only long enough to grab a caramel apple before retreating to my workshop. This year felt different. I parked my truck a few blocks away and walked toward the town square, unusually aware of my appearance. I'd swapped my typical work clothes for a clean flannel shirt in deep blue and my least worn jeans. My nervous energy surprised me. This wasn't a date, just two neighbors enjoying a community tradition together. I spotted Eliza near the central fountain, her auburn and silver hair catching the golden hour light. She wore an emerald sweater and a burgundy scarf, autumn colors that complemented the festival's atmosphere perfectly. When she saw me approaching, her smile carried a warmth I was still getting accustomed to. The craftsman emerges from his workshop, she greeted me. I half expected you to arrive with sawdust in your hair. I save that for special occasions, I replied, oddly pleased by her teasing, so I did have to check my pockets twice for stray nails. We wandered through the festival together, sampling harvest treats and examining handcrafted goods at the local artisans section. I found myself evaluating the woodwork with a professional eye, admiring some pieces, mentally redesigning others. You're critiquing the joinery, aren't you? Liza observed as I studied a maple cutting board. That obvious? You have the same expression I get when reading student essays, appreciation mixed with an irresistible urge to make corrections. We laughed, discovering yet another unexpected similarity in our different worlds. As twilight settled over Riverside, the festival lights created golden pools throughout the square. Strings of Edison bulbs crisscrossed overhead, and the scent of cinnamon and wood smoke filled the air. A local band started playing folk music on the central stage, their harmonies blending with the evening breeze. Care to dance? Liza asked, nodding toward the small area where couples had begun swaying to the music. I hesitated. I should warn you, my dancing skills make my cooking look sophisticated. You'll take my chances, she replied, extending her hand. We joined the dancers, keeping a respectful distance between us as we moved to the gentle rhythm. Eliza followed my awkward steps with graceful accommodation, somehow making my lack of coordination seem almost intentional. You weren't exaggerating. About your dancing, she noted with amusement. I never exaggerate about my limitations, I said. It sets a low bar that I occasionally manage to clear. As we danced, I became aware of curious glances from townspeople. Mrs. Bennet stood near the cider booth, not even pretending to do anything but watch us. Mr. Lewis, my boss from the woodworking shop, raised an eyebrow as we passed. Who spotted us from across the square, gave an exaggerated thumbs up that made me roll my eyes. "We've become Riverside's favorite reality show," I murmured. "Small towns need their entertainment," Elisa replied philosophically. A scandal at the town council. When the song ended, we drifted toward the festival's edge, finding a quiet bench beneath an old oak tree. The slight distance from the crowd created a bubble of privacy, though we remained visible to curious onlookers. "Why does it bother you?" Eliza asked suddenly. "The attention?" I considered the question, trying to articulate feelings I hadn't fully examined. I've always valued my privacy. My work is visible, houses, furniture, repairs, but I've kept myself separate. Like a craftsman's mark, she observed. It's present in the work but not calling attention to itself. Something like that. Her analogy resonated more than I expected. "What about you? Does it bother you?" She gazed thoughtfully at the festival lights. "After David died, I became the widow walker, defined by absence rather than presence. This attention feels different. It's about something growing rather than something lost." Her words settled between us, profound in their simplicity. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the festival swirl around us until the aroma of something sweet drew our attention. "Funnel cake?" I suggested, nodding toward a nearby booth. "I haven't had funnel cake since I was 30, Eliza laughed. "My dignity might never recover. Dignity is overrated at harvest festivals." We shared the powdered sugar confection, laughing as it inevitably dusted our clothes. In that moment, beneath festival lights with sugar on our fingers, age difference and town gossip seemed remarkably unimportant. As the evening progressed, we encountered more of our neighbors, some openly curious, others politely pretending our friendship wasn't the subject of community speculation. Principal Morris from the elementary school stopped to chat about a bookshelf I'd built for the library. The conversation shifted naturally to literature, with Eliza recommending titles for reluctant young readers. "You two should collaborate on the new reading nook we're planning," Morris suggested. "Combine craftsmanship and literary expertise." The casual suggestion planted a seed that would grow in unexpected ways. Later, as the festival began winding down, we passed the fortune-teller's tent, a festival tradition handled by Mrs. Ney Abernathy, who taught 3rd grade during the week and read palms on weekends. "Let's get our fortunes told," Eliza suggested with unexpected playfulness. "You don't strike me as someone who believes in fortune-telling," I said, surprised. "I believe in good stories," she replied. "Fortune-telling is just another form of narrative." Inside the purple tent, Mrs. Abernathy's eyes widened slightly at our entrance clearly. We weren't the typical teenage couples or giggling friends who usually sought her services. She composed herself quickly, gesturing to the chairs across. From her small table, "Whose future shall we explore first?" she asked, her voice carrying the slight theatrical quality required for her weekend profession. "Ladies first," I deferred. And Eliza extended her hand across the table. Mrs. Abernathy studied Eliza's palm with convincing concentration. "I see a life rich with knowledge and words," she began. "A path with unexpected turns. Recent years have been solitary, but your heartline shows renewal." Elisa remained impassive, though I noticed her other hand tighten slightly on her knee. "There's creativity here waiting to be expressed in new ways," Mrs. Abernathy continued, "and connections forming that bridge different worlds." When my turn came, the fortune-teller traced the lines on my palm with her fingertip. "Strong hands, a builder's hands," she observed. "But there's more here than physical creation. Your life path shows a return to origins before moving forward again." Her reading continued with just enough specificity to be interesting and enough vagueness to apply to anyone. Still, something in her assessment resonated, particularly her final observation, "You've been crafting a shelter, but now you're building a bridge." Outside the tent, we exchanged amused glances. "Well, that was appropriately cryptic," I said. "All good narratives leave room for interpretation," Eliza replied, though the bridge between worlds part was a bit on the nose. The harvest moon hung low and golden as we walked back toward our street, its light casting long shadows across the pavement. Despite the evening chill, neither of us rushed. Our conversation meandered from festival observations to childhood memories of autumn. Traditions. When we reached the point between our houses, we paused at the invisible boundary where our paths would diverge. "Thank you for convincing me to experience the festival properly," I said. "It was illuminating." "Thank you for the company," she replied, "and for not minding the town's attention." We stood there a moment longer than necessary, both seemingly reluctant to end the evening. Finally, Eliza broke the silence. "The elementary school reading nook. Would you consider it a collaboration, combining literature and woodworking?" The idea appealed to me immediately. "I'd like that." Her smile held satisfaction. "Speak with Principal Morris on Monday." She turned toward her house. She added, "Your lawn needs attention, by the way. The maple leaves are staging a rebellion." I laughed, glancing at my yard where autumn leaves had indeed accumulated. "Are you offering your supervisory services? Perhaps a trade? Lawn consultation for woodworking assistance with my bookshelves? They need reorganizing." "Deal," I agreed easily. Watching her walk away, I realized our connection had evolved into something I hadn't anticipated but now valued deeply. Not romance in the conventional sense, but a partnership of mutual respect and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. Back in my house, I noticed how empty it felt after the evenings. Warmth and conversation. I picked up the copy of Hemingway she'd given me, finding comfort in the words and in the knowledge that she'd chosen them specifically for me, just before midnight. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Town verdict. Dancing with the professor means you're officially cultured now." I replied, "Fortune teller says I'm building bridges. Cryptic enough." His immediate response, "Building bridges or burning gossip bridges? Either way, I'm here for it." Sleep came easily that night, my dreams filled with festival lights and the gentle cadence of Eliza's voice discussing books amid the sound of my woodworking tools. Sunday morning brought clear skies and the perfect temperature for yard work. I was raking maple leaves when I spotted Eliza emerging from her house, garden gloves already on her hands. "Lawn consultation begins in 5 minutes," she called across the street. I gave an exaggerated salute with my rake. "Yes, ma'am." Working together, we transformed my neglected yard into something presentable, not quite matching the pristine standards of her own garden. Eliza had a gift for organization, approaching the yard like a text to be edited, removing what didn't belong, highlighting natural beauty, creating a coherent whole. "Your approach to landscaping is remarkably similar to literary criticism," I observed as we bagged leaves. "All disciplines share fundamental principles," she replied. "Structure, balance, purpose, attention to detail." When we finished, my yard had undergone a noticeable transformation. Mrs. Bennet, predictably, had found reasons to water her mums 3 separate times while watching our progress. "Bookshelf reorganization next weekend?" one suggested as we admired our work. "Perfect," Eliza agreed. "I have several volumes requiring proper homes." That afternoon, inspired by our conversation about the elementary school project, I sketched preliminary designs for a reading nook. The creative energy flowed easily, my pencil capturing images of built-in benches with hidden storage, adjustable shelving, and a central storytelling chair that would make any third grader eager to hear about magical wardrobes or chocolate factories. Monday brought a return to routine. I had 3 jobs scheduled across town: repairing a staircase, building custom shelving for a new bakery, and assessing a historic porch that needed restoration. Throughout the day, my mind kept returning to the reading nook design and, inevitably, to Elisa. By Wednesday, Principal Morris had officially reached out about the elementary school project, explaining that Elisa had proposed a collaborative approach combining physical space and content curation. We scheduled a meeting for the following week, and I found myself unusually excited about the prospect. That evening, a knock at my door revealed Eliza holding a folder of papers. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "I've been thinking about the reading nook and wanted to share some research on effective literacy spaces." We spread her articles and notes across my dining table, her academic approach complementing my practical considerations. She'd compiled studies on how physical environments affect reading engagement, optimal arrangements for both individual reading and group storytelling, even color psychology for learning spaces. "This is impressive," I admitted, genuinely awed by her thoroughness. "Old habits," she shrugged. "I approached every class I taught with this level of preparation. Your students were fortunate." Her expression softened. "Teaching was never just a job for me. It was a calling, helping young minds discover the power of words, the worlds contained within pages." "You miss it," I observed. "Parts of it," she acknowledged. "The moments when a student truly connects with a text for the first time. The discussions that veer into unexpected territory, not the administrative meetings or grading papers at midnight." As we worked together on the project concept, I realized how naturally our skills complemented each other. My practical knowledge of materials and construction meshed with her understanding of how spaces influence learning and engagement. We debated, compromised, and built upon each other's ideas with a synchronicity that felt both professional and personal. When she finally gathered her papers to leave, it was nearly midnight. "This collaboration has potential," she said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm I hadn't seen before. "Agreed," I replied, "though Mrs. Bennett will have a field day with your car parked outside my house until midnight." Eliza laughed. "Letter. Some things are worth the gossip." The rest of the week passed in a pleasant rhythm of work and occasional texts, exchanging ideas for the reading nook. By the weekend, I developed detailed sketches based on our discussions, ready to share them during our scheduled bookshelf reorganization. Saturday morning found me crossing the street to Eliza's house, toolbox in hand. Though I'd been inside once before, entering her home still felt like stepping into a carefully curated museum of her life. Books dominated the space, not just on shelves, but stacked on side tables, tucked into window seats, even forming impromptu side tables topped with lamps. "I may have underestimated the scope of this project," I said, surveying the literary landscape. "I downsized when I moved here," Eliza replied with complete seriousness. "You should have seen my college office." Her main living room featured floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on 2 walls, organized in a system only she fully understood. Literary criticism shared space with poetry collections, classic novels, and surprisingly, a substantial section on architectural history. "David's influence," she explained, following my gaze to the architecture books. "He believed one should understand the history of spaces as well as the history of ideas." We spent the morning emptying shelves with Eliza explaining her categorization system while I assessed the structural needs of the bookcases. Some needed reinforcement, others required adjustable shelving to accommodate different book sizes. "These were here when I bought the house," she explained. "Serviceable but not optimized." "I could build custom shelves," I offered, already envisioning improvements, "with proper support for the heavier volumes and adjustable sections for flexibility." Her eyes lit up. "Would you?" "I've considered it, but wasn't sure who to ask." "Consider it a trade for your garden expertise and literary guidance," I said. "Though this might require multiple weekends, I have excellent coffee and a comfortable reading chair for breaks," she countered, "and patience for worthwhile projects." By midday, we'd created organized stacks throughout the living room, each representing a category in Eliza's literary universe. The empty shelves revealed their inadequacies, sagging in places, fixed shelving that wasted space, supports that had weakened over time. I took measurements and notes, already planning improvements in my mind. When we broke for lunch, Eliza produced sandwiches and homemade lemonade, which we ate surrounded by book mountains like explorers camping in a literary mountain range. I brought the reading nook sketches, I mentioned between bites, pulling the rolled papers from my bag. Eliza examined them with careful attention, asking questions about materials and construction details, while offering suggestions about functional aspects. "The storytelling throne is inspired," she said, tracing the central chair design with her finger. "Elevated but not intimidating, visible to all students but still intimate." "I thought about how the physical experience shapes the storytelling," I explained. "A special chair signals that something magical is about to happen, that stories deserve their own space." She looked at me with new appreciation. You understand the ritual of reading better than many educators I've known. The compliment warmed me unexpectedly. We spent the afternoon discussing modifications to the design, with Eliza suggesting a small stage to further elevate the experience and built-in washable covers for practical durability. As evening approached, we'd made significant progress on both her bookshelves and the reading nook design. The living room remained in organized chaos, but with a clear plan forward. Same time tomorrow, I suggested. I can bring the portable workbench and start on the shelf modifications. Perfect, she agreed. I'll provide sustenance and literary commentary. Walking home in the dusk, I realized how comfortable our partnership had become, the easy exchange of ideas, the natural division of tasks based on our strengths, the shared enthusiasm for creating something meaningful together. Jason called. As I was unloading tools in my workshop, curious about the bookshelf project he'd heard about through Riverside's efficient grapevine. So you're remodeling her library now? He asked, amusement evident in his voice, moving fast for a just friends situation. It's a practical arrangement, I explained, though his teasing didn't bother me as it once might have. She helps with garden design. I help with woodworking. We're collaborating on the elementary school project. Hung, Jason replied skeptically. The fact that the entire town is watching this relationship evolve like a seasonal drama. Series means nothing? We're aware of the audience, I admitted. We just don't care much about the reviews. After hanging up, I spent the evening preparing materials for Eliza's bookshelves, cutting supports and planning modifications that would maximize her space while preserving the original character of the built-ins. The work centered me, the familiar rhythm of measuring, cutting, and sanding, creating a meditative space where thoughts could wander and settle. I realized that something fundamental had shifted in my approach to life in Riverside. For 3 years I'd lived here without truly participating in the community. I'd built things for people, but maintained careful distance from their lives. Somehow, Eliza had bridged that gap, not just between us, but between me and the town itself. Sunday morning arrived with unexpected rain, a gentle but persistent drizzle that painted Riverside in watercolors. I loaded my truck with tools and materials, covering everything carefully before making the short drive across the street to avoid the worst of the weather. Eliza answered the door in reading glasses and a sweater, the color of autumn leaves, a book still in her hand. Perfect weather for bookshelf building, she observed. The rain makes staying indoors with books feel righteous rather than reclusive. We settled into a comfortable working pattern. I began reinforcing the existing shelves while Eliza continued sorting and cataloging her collection. The rain tapped against the windows, creating a soothing backdrop to our conversation, which wandered through topics like favorite childhood books, the merits of different wood species for furniture, and the challenge of preserving knowledge. In a digital age, something irreplaceable about physical books, Eliza said, running her hand along the spine of a well-worn poetry collection. The weight, the texture, the subtle scent of paper and binding glue. Digital formats offer convenience, but sacrifice sensory experience. Like the difference between looking at a photograph of wood grain and running your hand over the actual surface? I suggested. Exactly, she agreed. I suspect most people would find both of us hopelessly romantic about our preferred materials. By late afternoon, I had reinforced the existing structure and installed new adjustable shelving on one wall. The transformation was already visible, more efficient use of space, stronger supports for heavier volumes, and a more aesthetically balanced appearance. Eliza stood back to admire the progress. It's remarkable what skilled hands can accomplish. In a day, the shelves or the organization? Asked, nodding toward her methodically arranged stacks. Both. We make a surprisingly effective team for 2 people who preferred solitude until recently. The observation hung in the rain-hushed room, an acknowledgement of how our lives had intertwined over the past weeks. Neither of us seemed inclined to analyze it further. The fact simply existed, like the grain in wood or the binding of a book. As I packed up my tools, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof and streaming down the windows. You should stay for dinner, Elisa said. I have a vegetable soup simmering that's perfect for rainy evenings. The invitation, once surprising, now felt natural. We ate at her kitchen table, the conversation flowing as easily as the rain outside. She shared stories of her teaching days, the student who hand-delivered essays because he didn't trust email, the faculty meetings that inspired her collection of increasingly creative doodles, the graduation ceremony where a former student thanked her for introducing the book that changed her career path. In turn, I talked about my apprenticeship with my grandfather, learning to select lumber by touch and sound, the satisfaction of finishing a piece with hand tools rather than power equipment, the legacy of his craftsmanship visible throughout Riverside in porch railings, custom cabinets, and carved mantels. He believed in building things that outlast their maker, I explained. He used to say that good craftsmanship is a conversation with the future. I like that, Eliza said thoughtfully. It's similar to how I view literature, a dialogue, across time and space. After dinner, we moved to her living room, navigating between the book stacks to reach comfortable chairs. The rain continued unabated, creating a cozy enclosure that seemed to exist outside normal time. Eliza made tea, and we settled into conversation that gradually shifted from professional to personal. "Do you ever think about returning to teaching?" I asked. She considered the question, cradling her teacup. "Sometimes, I miss the intellectual engagement, the community of ideas, but I left for reasons beyond David's death." She paused, seeming to decide how much to share. The university was changing, more concerned with metrics than meaning, assessment tools rather than actual learning. I found myself spending more time justifying my methods than implementing them. "Said you retired to Riverside to garden with mathematical precision instead," I observed with a smile. "Precisely," she acknowledged. "My flowers don't require outcomes." "Assessment reports. What about you? You ever think about larger projects than Riverside can offer?" The question made me consider possibilities I'd set aside years ago. Occasionally, I trained for furniture design initially, creating pieces that were functional art rather than just utilitarian. Sometimes I sketch ideas that won't find homes in Riverside. "Yet you stay." "Yet I stay," I echoed. "Reasons that made sense 3 years ago, and others that are still emerging." Our eyes met briefly across the book-strewn room, an unspoken recognition passing between us. We were both in Riverside by choice, by circumstance, by a complex interweaving of past decisions and present contentment. The evening deepened into night, our conversation continuing until the rain finally subsided into occasional drips from the eaves. When I finally stood to leave, the clock showed nearly midnight. "Thank you," Eliza said at the door. "Not just for the shelves, but for the conversation." Good dialogue has become a rare luxury in my life. "For me as well," I admitted, "worth every splinter and book dust particle." Walking back to my house under clearing skies, I felt a profound sense of connection, not just to Eliza, but to something larger. The fortuitous meeting of two people with complementary perspectives, creating something neither would have built alone. As I unlocked my door, my phone buzzed with a text. I expected Jason's inevitable commentary, but instead found a message from Eliza. "The shelves already feel more like home. Thank you for understanding that books need proper foundations," I replied. "Like all worthwhile things. See you tomorrow at the school meeting." Inside, my house felt different, not empty as it sometimes did after spending time at Eliza's, but full of possibility. The sketches for her custom bookshelves lay on my table beside the reading nook plans. 2 projects, 2 purposes, interconnected through collaboration. I fell asleep thinking about adjustable shelving and storytelling thrones, architectural history and literary criticism, rain-soaked evenings, and the unexpected bridges forming between seemingly separate worlds. Monday morning arrived with golden sunlight and the sweet scent of fallen leaves. I drove to Riverside Elementary with my portfolio of reading nook sketches, feeling an unusual mixture of professional confidence and personal anticipation. Eliza was already waiting in the school parking lot, a leather portfolio under her arm, and reading glasses perched atop her head, ready to impress the educational establishment. I asked as we walked toward the entrance. "After 20 years of faculty meetings, this feels refreshingly straightforward," she replied with a smile. "No hidden agendas, just a simple goal: create a space where children fall in love with reading." Principal Morris welcomed us into her office with evident enthusiasm. A woman in her 40s with practical efficiency in every gesture, she'd been championing the Reading Nook project for months without finding the right combination of skills and vision to bring it to life. When Eliza suggested a collaboration, it was like the final puzzle pieces falling into place, she explained, clearing space on her desk for our materials. The school board approved the budget last week, so your timing is perfect. I spread out the preliminary designs while Eliza presented her research on effective literacy spaces. The principal studied both with careful attention, occasionally asking questions about materials, maintenance requirements, and educational adaptability. What impresses me most, Maurice said finally, is how the design creates both community and privacy simultaneously. Children can gather for shared experiences but also retreat into individual reading spaces. That was Nathan's insight, Eliza acknowledged, glancing my way. The physical manifestation of how reading works, a shared cultural experience, that's also deeply personal. The principal looked between us with undisguised curiosity. You two have developed quite a synergy in a short time. The whole town's noticed. I felt heat rise in my face, but Eliza responded with her characteristic directness. Small towns notice everything except what truly matters. What matters here is creating something meaningful for the children. Morris nodded, accepting the gentle redirection. Indeed. And speaking of meaning, we'd like this to be a dedicated space, named for someone who championed literacy in our community. The board suggested the Margaret Hamilton Reading Nook after our longest-serving librarian. Perfect, Eliza approved. Margaret would have loved this concept. After finalizing a timeline and budget details, we left with official approval. To begin the project, walking across the schoolyard where children were engaged in spirited recess activities, I felt a surge of purpose. We're actually doing this, I said, somewhat amazed that our collaborative sketching had transformed into a funded project. Did you doubt we would? Lisa asked, her pace matching mine as we headed toward the parking lot. Not doubted exactly. But there's a difference between planning something and seeing it materialize. She nodded, the gap between concept and creation. You bridge it every day with your carpentry. For me, it was always the space between literary theory and student engagement. In the bright October morning, standing between yellow buses and playground equipment, we shared a moment of mutual understanding that transcended our different backgrounds. We were builders, she of minds, I of structures, united in creating something that would outlast us. Coffee to celebrate, suggested, nodding toward Riverside's only cafe across from the school. I have a class to teach at 11, she replied, but I can spare 30 minutes. This was news to me, a class. I thought you'd retired. From the university? Yes. But I started a literature circle for seniors at the community center last month. Today we're discussing Steinbeck. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, yet it did. Despite our growing closeness, there were still aspects of Eliza's life I was discovering, whole chapters I hadn't yet read. At Silver Spoon Caf, we claimed a corner table and ordered coffee. Through the window, we could see the elementary school where our reading nook would soon take shape. The cafe hummed with morning conversations, parents' post-school drop-off, retirees with newspapers, remote workers with laptops. 2 successful collaborations, Eliza said, raising her mug in a small toast. And unexpected partnerships, I added. As we discussed next steps for the project, I noticed several patrons glancing our way with poorly disguised interest. Riverside's Grapevine was clearly operating at full capacity. How are you handling the attention? I asked quietly. It seems to have intensified. Eliza considered the question while stirring her coffee. I find it simultaneously amusing and irrelevant. People will create narratives regardless of reality. What matters is the work we're doing and the genuine connection we've formed. Genuine connection, I repeated, liking how the words acknowledged our relationship without forcing it into conventional categories. Precisely. Not everything needs a label, Nathan. Some relationships simply exist in their own unique space. Her clarity was refreshing. While I'd been silently navigating the undefined nature of our friendship, wondering if I should address it directly, Eliza had already reached a comfortable understanding. The reading nook will require regular meetings, I noted, returning to practical matters. Planning sessions, material selection, construction updates. Mrs. Bennet will be delighted, Eliza replied dryly. Her surveillance operation will have regular scheduling. We both laughed, and in that shared moment of humor, I felt something settle within me, a comfortable acceptance of whatever this relationship was becoming, without anxiety about definitions or expectations. After coffee, we parted ways, Eliza to her literature circle, I to a cabinet installation across town. The day passed in a blur of measurements and precision cuts, yet part of my mind remained engaged with our morning meeting planning wood, selections and construction sequences for the reading nook. That evening, I sketched more detailed plans for the project, focusing on construction elements that would need to be built in my workshop before installation. Around 9, my phone chimed with a text from Eliza. Steinbeck discussion phenomenal. Seniors have perspective younger students lack. Planning Emily Dickinson next week. I smiled at her enthusiasm, texting back, glad it went well, making material lists for the nook. Thinking cedar for the main structure, warm tone, natural resistance to damage. A reply came quickly. Cedar has literary significance too. Ancient symbol of strength and eternity, appropriate for housing timeless stories. This seamless blend of practical and poetic thinking had become characteristic of our exchanges, her academic knowledge enriching my craftsman's perspective, my tactile understanding giving physical form to her concepts. Throughout the week, we established a new routine around the Reading Nook project. Mornings often began with texts exchanging ideas that had occurred overnight. Evenings sometimes included brief meetings to review progress or solve design challenges. We created a shared document where both of us could add notes, research findings, or modification suggestions. By Friday, we had finalized material selections and structural plans. The school board had approved our updated design and principle. Morris had scheduled construction to begin the following week. The project was moving forward with remarkable efficiency, fueled by our complementary approaches and shared vision. That evening, Jason insisted on meeting for dinner at Riverside Grill. He was curious about the reading nook that had become the town's latest topic of interest. So you went from mowing the professor's lawn to building a literary sanctuary for children? He summarized over burgers. It's quite an evolution in 1 month. When you put it that way, it does sound improbable, I admitted. Not improbable, Jason corrected. Just unexpected. It's like watching someone who always ordered vanilla suddenly discover they love pistachio gelato. I laughed at his analogy. I'm not sure which flavor I represent in this scenario. Doesn't matter, he shrugged. The point is, you seem happier than I've seen you since you moved back. More engaged. That's like you're just passing through your own life. His observation struck me with its accuracy. I had been passing through. Going through the motions of living in Riverside without truly inhabiting my life here. Somehow, Eliza had disrupted that pattern, drawing me into active participation rather than mere existence. It's not romantic, you know, I felt compelled to clarify. We're friends, colleagues on this project. Jason raised an eyebrow. Does it need to be romantic to be significant? The question lingered as I drove home, navigating Riverside's quiet streets. Jason was right. Whatever Elisa and I shared didn't require conventional categorization to be meaningful. Its significance lay in how it had expanded both our lives, creating new possibilities neither of us had anticipated. Found me in my workshop, cutting cedar boards for the reading nook's structural elements. The rich aroma of the wood filled the space as I shaped each piece with careful precision. Around noon, a knock at the door revealed Eliza holding a wicker basket. I thought you might forget to eat, she said, stepping into the sawdust-filled workshop. Creative focus tends to override basic needs. The basket contained sandwiches, homemade apple cider, and oatmeal cookies. Simple but thoughtful sustenance. For a working Saturday, you didn't have to do this, I said, though I was genuinely touched by the gesture. Consider it fuel for our project, she replied, finding a relatively clean workbench to unpack the food. Besides, I was curious to see your creative space. Lisa moved through my workshop with appreciative interest, examining tools and running her fingers over various wood samples. Unlike most visitors who saw only a dusty utilitarian space, she seemed to recognize it as a place of creation and possibility. "This is where the magic happens," she observed, picking up a handplane. "Where raw materials become functional. Art." "I wouldn't call it art," I demurred, wiping sawdust from my hands. "Just craftsmanship." "The distinction is artificial," she countered, replacing the tool carefully. "Art, craft, creation, they're all manifestations of the same human impulse to shape the world into something meaningful." As we ate lunch surrounded by the pleasant scent of freshly cut cedar, our conversation shifted to childhood memories of favorite reading spaces. Eliza described a window seat in her grandparents' home where she'd spent countless hours with books during summer visits. It had this perfect combination of light and seclusion, she recalled. I could see the garden and feel connected to the household, but I was also in my own world with whatever I was reading. That's exactly what we're trying to create with the Nook, I realized. That sense of being simultaneously connected and apart. "What about you?" she asked. "Where did young Nathan read?" I smiled at the memory. In my grandfather's workshop, actually. He had this old leather armchair tucked between the lathe and the lumber rack. I'd sit there with adventure stories. While he worked, the smell of wood and the sound of his tools became part of every story I read. "No wonder you understand the importance of the physical environment for reading," Eliza said. "You experienced it directly." After lunch, she insisted on helping with the project. I hesitated. Power tools and precision cuts weren't casual activities, but Eliza's determination won out. I showed her how to sand the cedar boards, explaining how to follow the grain and achieve a smooth finish without destroying the wood's natural character. She approached the task with the same focused attention she gave to literary analysis, quickly developing a feel for the process. As we worked side by side in the sawdust-filled light, I found myself thinking about how our different worlds had intersected in unexpected ways, creating something neither of us would have imagined alone. "What are you smiling about?" Eliza asked, pausing in her sanding. "Just thinking about how life takes strange turns," I replied. "A month ago, I was avoiding lawn duty, and we're building a reading sanctuary together." "The universe has a peculiar sense of narrative structure," she agreed, though I suspect Mrs. Bennet would attribute it to her matchmaking prayers rather than cosmic storytelling. By late afternoon, we had prepared most of the structural components for the reading nook. Eliza's hands, more accustomed to turning pages than sanding wood, showed the beginnings of blisters, despite the gloves I'd lent her. "Battle scars of creation," she said dismissively when I expressed concern. "Worth every splinter." Was preparing to leave. Eliza paused at the workshop door. "My son is visiting next weekend," she said, the statement carrying weight beyond its simple content. "Andrew lives in Seattle, works in software development. He tries to visit every few months." This was the first time she had mentioned having a child. Another chapter of her life I hadn't known about. "I'd like you to meet him," she continued. "Perhaps dinner at my place on Saturday? He's bringing his partner, Emma." The invitation felt significant, a deliberate introduction to an important part of her life, an expansion of our connection beyond our shared projects. "I'd like that," I said simply. She nodded, satisfied. "Good. He's heard about you, of course. The entire Reading Nook project, the bookshelf renovation, and the lawn mowing that started it all, especially that," she smiled. "He finds the whole progression highly entertaining." After she left, I continued working until dusk, the workshop gradually darkening around me. Eliza's revelation about her son had shifted something in my understanding of her life. I had known about her husband David, but somehow had assumed they hadn't had children. This new information completed another piece of the puzzle that was Eliza Walker. Sunday brought heavy rain that drummed against the workshop roof, while I applied finish to the cedar components. The rhythmic sound created a meditative backdrop as I worked, thinking about the coming week, the start of construction at the school, the dinner with Eliza's son and his partner, the continuing evolution of whatever was developing between Elisa and me. Monday morning at the elementary school, Principal Morris had arranged for maintenance staff to help unload and transport the pre-built components to the library. The designated corner had been cleared with plastic sheeting protecting Surrounding areas from construction dust. Elisa arrived shortly after I did, carrying coffee and pastries from Silver Spoon. Sustenance for the builders, she announced, distributing cups to the maintenance workers who accepted them with grateful nods. Over the next 3 days, the reading nook took shape. I focused on structural assembly while coordinating with the school's electrician for lighting installation. Eliza worked with the librarian to select initial books for the space and develop a rotation system that would showcase different genres and reading levels throughout the year. Breaks, we often sat in the school courtyard, discussing progress and modifications. Several teachers stopped by to express excitement about the project, and a few students pressed their faces against windows to watch the construction, their curiosity visible even from a distance. We're creating something they'll remember, Eliza observed on Wednesday as we watched a group of third graders pointing at the partially completed nook. A physical space that might shape their relationship with reading forever. No pressure, I joked, though I felt the weight of that responsibility. The best creations come from a balance of careful planning and intuitive response, she replied. You understand that in woodworking, I learned it in teaching. We plan meticulously, then remain flexible enough to adapt when reality offers better options. By Thursday afternoon, the structural elements were complete, built-in benches with storage underneath, adjustable shelving, the central storytelling chair elevated on a small platform, carefully positioned lighting that created both overall illumination and intimate reading spots. Friday would be dedicated to finishing touches, cushions, the first selection of books, and a custom sign that a local artist was creating for the space. The official opening was scheduled for Monday morning with a ribbon-cutting ceremony. In the first storytelling session, that evening, Eliza invited me to dinner, saying she needed to discuss final details before Andrew's visit. Her kitchen smelled of rosemary and garlic, a pasta sauce simmering on the stove while she chopped vegetables for a salad. Andrew and Emma are vegetarians, she explained, adding bell peppers to the bowl. I've been expanding my meatless repertoire. I leaned against the counter, watching her efficient movements. Tell me about him. Beyond the software development in Seattle, she smiled, her knife pausing momentarily. He's 31, brilliant but quiet, takes after his father in analytical thinking, but has my stubborn streak.
Nice.
Plays classical piano. Hikes on weekends, collects vintage science fiction paperbacks, and Emma, environmental lawyer. They met at a climate conference 3 years ago. She challenges him, draws him out of his shell. I liked her immediately. As she spoke about her son, I saw a different facet of Eliza, the maternal pride. Beneath her professional exterior, the connection to family that existed alongside her independent life in Riverside. They've been asking about you, she admitted, returning to her chopping. Apparently, Mrs. Bennett's Facebook updates about our blossoming friendship have reached Seattle. I laughed, unsurprised. The digital grapevine extends far beyond Riverside's boundaries indeed. Andrew found it particularly amusing that his bookish mother was suddenly the subject of small-town romantic speculation. And what did you tell him? I asked, genuinely curious about how she described our relationship to her family. She considered the question while adding dressing to the salad. I told him I'd found a kindred spirit with complementary skills and perspectives. Someone who understands the value of precision and craftsmanship, whether in words or wood. The description was both accurate and meaningful, acknowledging the unique connection we'd formed without forcing it into conventional categories. That's a good way to put it, I said. A kindred spirit with complementary skills. She nodded, satisfied. Sometimes the simplest descriptions are the most precise. After dinner, we finalized plans for the Reading Nook's completion. Eliza had selected quotes about reading and imagination to be displayed on small wooden plaques between bookshelves, another integration of literature and craftsmanship that characterized our collaboration. I should have these finished by tomorrow morning, I promised, copying down the quotes and measurements. Hand-carved lettering will take time, but they'll be ready for Monday's opening. You don't have to do that, she protested. Could. Simply print them. A reading nook built from cedar deserves hand-carved quotations, I insisted. Details matter. Her smile conveyed understanding. We both recognized the importance of craftsmanship in creating something authentic and lasting. Walking home later that evening, I felt a profound sense of anticipation. not just for the completion of the reading nook, but for meeting Andrew and Emma, for whatever might develop next in this unexpected connection with Eliza. The Towns. Speculation and Jason's teasing seemed increasingly irrelevant compared to the genuine relationship we were building. Whatever form it might take. Saturday morning brought sunshine after days of rain. I delivered the hand-carved quote plaques to the school, where Eliza was already arranging books on the newly installed shelves. When she saw the wooden pieces, each letter carefully carved and sanded, her expression shifted from approval to something deeper. "These are beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the recessed letters. "A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies," from George R.R. Martin. Perfect. I stayed up late, I admitted.
Oh.
But it felt important to get them right. Together, we installed the plaques between bookshelves, their cedar material matching. The structural elements of the nook. The maintenance staff had added the cushions. Deep blue with golden accents that complemented the warm wood tones, and the local artist had delivered a beautifully painted sign. For the entrance, the Margaret Hamilton Reading Nook, where stories come alive. Standing back to view the completed space, I felt a surge of satisfaction, unlike anything I'd experienced with previous projects. Perhaps because this creation combined my craftsmanship with Eliza's vision, or perhaps because it would serve generations of young readers. The Reading Nook represented something beyond simple construction. "We did it," Eliza said softly, standing beside me. "We did," I agreed. "Though I suspect its real life begins on Monday when the children arrive." "That's true of all meaningful creations," she observed. "We build them, but they truly exist. When they're used, experienced, lived in." Principal Morris arrived to inspect the finished space, her professional demeanor briefly giving way to childlike excitement as she explored every feature. "This exceeds all expectations," she declared. "The school board will be amazed. More importantly, the children will love it." After completing final adjustments and reviewing Monday's opening ceremony plans, Eliza and I walked back to Willow Lane together. The conversation shifted to evening preparations. Andrew and Emma would arrive around 5. Dinner was planned for 7. Should I bring anything? I asked as we approached her house. "Just yourself," she replied. "And perhaps your perspective on our Reading Nook experience?" Andrew was skeptical that a literature professor and a carpenter could create something cohesive without compromising each other's vision. "Little did he know we'd find strength in those differences," I said. She nodded, exactly what I told him. Sometimes the most interesting creations emerge from unexpected combinations. At home, I spent more time than usual preparing for the evening, selecting clothes that struck a balance between casual and presentable. Even polishing the work boots I rarely bothered to maintain. Meeting Eliza's son felt significant. A crossing of some threshold in our relationship that I couldn't quite define but instinctively recognized. As I was about to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Good luck meeting the family. Remember, firm handshake, maintain eye contact, and don't mention the town's betting pool on your relationship status." I texted back, "There's a betting pool." His immediate response, "Joke, probably." But Mrs. Bennett was studying wedding venues online at the cafe yesterday, shaking my head at Riverside's unstoppable rumor mill. I crossed the street to Eliza's house, where an unfamiliar hybrid car with Washington plates sat in the driveway. The evening ahead represented another unexpected turn in this journey that had begun with a simple lawn mowing request, a journey that continued to unfold in ways I could never have anticipated but now couldn't imagine living without. I took a deep breath before ringing Eliza's doorbell, surprised by my own nervousness. The door opened to reveal a young man with Eliza's thoughtful eyes and a quiet, observant demeanor. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, and he wore a casual button-down shirt that somehow managed to look both relaxed and precisely chosen. "You must be Nathan," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Andrew." Mom's in the kitchen, attempting to convince Emma that her pasta sauce doesn't need intervention. His dry humor immediately put me at ease. Shook hands, and he welcomed me inside, where delicious aromas were emanating from the kitchen. Following Andrew through the familiar living room now, with beautifully reorganized bookshelves that showcased both practical function and aesthetic balance. I felt a curious blend of visitor and collaborator. In the kitchen, Lisa was engaged in good-natured debate with a tall woman whose curly hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Emma turned at our entrance, her smile immediate and genuine. "The famous carpenter," she said, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel before offering one to shake. "I've heard so much about you in this reading nook. Andrew thinks you might be fictional, too perfectly complementary to his mother's literary focus to be real." "Emma," Andrew protested mildly, though his expression remained amused. "I assure you I'm quite real," I replied, though the reading nook did turn out rather magical. Eliza glanced up from stirring her sauce, her eyes meeting mine with warm recognition. "Nathan brought his perspective photos of the finished space," she said. "I thought we could show them after dinner." The evening unfolded with surprising ease. Andrew, despite his initially reserved manner, proved to be thoughtful and articulate, asking insightful questions about the reading nook's design and construction. Emma brought passionate energy to discussions ranging from environmental law to the role of public spaces in community building. Throughout the conversation, I noticed subtle parallels between mother and son, the careful consideration before speaking, the precise vocabulary, the gentle humor that emerged when they felt comfortable. Over Eliza's remarkable pasta, which had indeed benefited from Emma's suggestion of fresh basil, Andrew shared stories of growing up with a literature professor for a mother. "She annotated my birthday cards," he recalled with affection. Notes about the symbolic significance of the cartoon characters or the historical context of the birthday wishes. "Only because you showed interest?" Eliza defended herself. "You were analyzing rhyme schemes at age 6. Nature and nurture," Emma observed, squeezing Andrew's hand. "Now, he does the same thing with code. Finds patterns, analyzes structure, appreciates elegant solutions." "Speaking of elegant solutions," Andrew said, turning to me, "Mom tells me you inherited your carpentry skills from your grandfather. Was it always something you wanted to pursue?" The question opened a conversation about legacy and vocation. How? Andrew had initially resisted following any predetermined path before discovering his own passion for programming. How Emma had known from childhood that she wanted to advocate for environmental protection. How I had found my way back to carpentry after trying other directions. "There's something profound about creating with your hands," Emma reflected. "In law, I rarely see tangible results. Progress comes in increments over years. But you've built this reading nook in a matter of weeks, and now children will physically experience your work. It's what draws me to it," I admitted. "The immediacy of creation, the tactile problem solving. That's what I love about teaching," Eliza added. "Seeing the moment when understanding dawns, it's visible, immediate, even though the long-term impact might take years to unfold." As dinner concluded, Andrew insisted on clearing dishes, while Emma helped Elisa prepare coffee. I offered my assistance, but Andrew waved me away. "Mom said you've been working overtime on this reading nook," he said. "Consider this your break." Left momentarily alone in the living room, I found myself examining the family photos displayed on one of the shelves I had modified. Most showed Andrew at various ages: graduation, hiking trips, at a piano recital. In several, a man with Andrew's jawline and serious expression stood beside a younger Elisa David, I presumed. They looked content together, a family unit with its own complete story. "That's my father's graduation from architecture school," Andrew said, returning with coffee cups. Mom was still working on her dissertation. I studied the photo. Eliza looked vibrant and focused, her arm linked through David's as he held his diploma. "They seem well matched," I observed. "They were," Andrew agreed, his voice reflective rather than sad. "Different fields, but similar minds. Both believed in creating spaces that shaped experience, he with buildings, she with literature." "That's a lovely way to think about it," I said, genuinely touched by his description. Andrew studied me with his mother's analytical gaze. "You know, when Mrs. Bennett's Facebook posts started appearing in Mom's feed, I was skeptical. Riverside isn't exactly known for nuanced understanding of unconventional relationships." "Understatement of the year?" I agreed with a smile. But talking with you tonight, seeing how you discuss the Reading Nook project, I get it now. You and Mom have built together makes sense, whether or not it fits into Riverside's preferred categories. Before I could respond, Eliza and Emma returned with coffee and a homemade apple tart. The conversation shifted to the photos of the Reading Nook, which I displayed on my tablet. Explaining the construction process while Eliza described the educational philosophy behind various features. "The storytelling chair is my favorite element," Emma declared, studying a close-up of the carved seat with its subtle crown motif along the back. "It elevates the reader literally and figuratively." "That was Nathan's design," Elisa explained. "He understood intuitively that physical positioning affects how children perceive the storyteller and the story itself." I just remembered how my grandfather's chair seemed like a throne when he read to me, I said. "Some experiences transcend generations." After dessert, Andrew suggested a walk along the river trail that wound behind Willow Lane. The evening was clear and cool, with stars emerging above the tree line and the distant sound of the Willamette providing gentle background music. 4 of us walked in companionable pairs, Emma and Eliza leading, discussing native plants for butterfly habitats, while Andrew and I followed at a slight distance. "Mom seems different," Andrew observed quietly. "More present, somehow. Since Dad died, she's been contained, precisely organized, but holding herself apart. This Reading Nook project has awakened something in her." "She's remarkable," I replied honestly, "the way she bridges theory and practice, abstract ideas and concrete applications." Andrew nodded thoughtfully. "That's always been her gift. Dad used to say she could find the architectural principles in a poem and the poetry in a blueprint." We walked in silence for a moment before he added, "Thank you for seeing that in her. For collaborating rather than just admiring from a distance. She needs engagement, not pedestals." His words resonated with my own evolving understanding of Eliza, not as the intimidating Professor Walker I had initially avoided, but as a multifaceted person with intellectual rigor, creative vision, and unexpected warmth. When we returned to the house, Emma announced they needed to head back to their hotel. They had an early drive to Seattle the next morning. The goodbyes were warm, with promises of future visits and updates on the Reading Nook's reception. "Next time, we expect a tour of your workshop," Emma said as they prepared to leave. "Andrew says you're building custom furniture that deserves wider recognition. Here's the script cleaned up for CapCut TTS." I glanced at Eliza, surprised. She shrugged with a small smile. "I may have shown them photos of the cherry dining table you completed last month." After Andrew and Emma departed, Eliza and I stood on her porch, watching their taillights disappear down Willow Lane. The evening had shifted something in our relationship. The introduction to her family had created a new dimension, a context beyond our shared projects. "They're wonderful. You must be proud." I am, though I take minimal credit. Andrew found his own path, his own partner, his own purpose. With your guidance, with the freedom to choose, the most important gift we can offer those we care about. Words hung in the night air, carrying significance beyond parenting philosophy. Freedom to choose had characterized our entire connection. From my decision to finally mow her lawn, to our collaborative approach on the Reading Nook, neither of us had imposed expectations or limitations on what our relationship might become. I should let you rest. Big day tomorrow with the Nook opening.
Indeed.
Thank you for tonight, for engaging with Andrew and Emma, for understanding why it mattered. Of course, walking back to my house under the stars, I felt a curious lightness. The evening had clarified something I'd been sensing, but hadn't fully articulated. That whatever Eliza and I were building extended beyond projects and collaborations to something more fundamental, a partnership based on mutual respect, creation, and the freedom to define our own parameters. Monday morning arrived with perfect autumn clarity. I reached the elementary school early to make final adjustments to the Reading Nook before the official opening ceremony. Principal Morris was already there, arranging chairs for visiting school board members and attaching colorful streamers to nearby bookshelves. This is quite the celebration. It deserves nothing less. We haven't had a facility improvement this significant in years. Plus, The children have been watching through windows all week. They're beyond excited. Eliza arrived shortly after, carrying a stack of new books tied with ribbon, her personal contribution to the Nook's initial collection. She wore a deep green dress that complemented the cedar woodwork, her professional demeanor softened by evident anticipation, ready for the grand unveiling, as ready as the Nook itself. By 9 o'clock, the library had filled with an audience representing every facet of Riverside School Board members in business attire. Teachers with their classes seated cross-legged on the floor, parents who had received special invitations, and even a few town officials, including Mayor Colson, who rarely attended school functions but recognized a photo opportunity when she saw one. Principal Morris welcomed everyone with a brief speech about the importance of reading spaces in childhood development, then introduced Eliza as the project's literary consultant. Eliza spoke eloquently about how physical environments shape intellectual experiences, crediting my craftsmanship with transforming educational theory into tangible reality. When my turn came to speak, I kept it simple. Wood has memory. These cedar beams will remember every story read here, every adventure shared, every world explored. Treat this space with care, and it will care for your imagination in return. The ribbon cutting followed, with the school's oldest and youngest students sharing the oversized scissors. As the red ribbon fell away, children surged forward to explore the Nook, running hands over smooth surfaces, testing the built-in benches, examining the hand-carved quotation plaques with curious fingers. This exceeds every expectation. You've created something truly special here. The formal portion of the ceremony concluded with the first official storytelling session. The librarian settling into the carved chair to read a picture book about a child building a treehouse. I noticed how the chair's elevated position naturally commanded attention, how the lighting created a warm focus on the book's illustrations, how the children leaned forward from their cushioned seats, completely engaged. Elisa stood beside me at the edge of the gathering, her expression a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal joy. It works. Everything we designed for, the acoustics, the sightlines, the sense of enclosure without confinement. Alive now, no longer our creation, but theirs. After the initial excitement settled into orderly exploration, the classes taking turns visiting the Nook throughout the morning, Eliza and I slipped away. We walked across the school grounds toward the parking lot, both quiet with the peculiar emptiness that follows a project's completion. Coffee? Perfect transition ritual. At our now-usual corner table, watching the school through the cafe window, we found ourselves discussing what came next. The reading Nook was finished. Her bookshelves were complete. The immediate reasons for our collaboration had concluded. I've been thinking about your furniture. The pieces you create beyond practical carpentry. The tables and cabinets Andrew mentioned. What about them? Have you ever considered exhibiting them? There's an artisan showcase in Portland each spring. David used to attend for architectural inspiration. I hesitated, caught off guard by the suggestion. They're just personal projects, things I make between paying jobs. They're more than that. The cherry table you completed shows exceptional design sensibility. The joinery alone deserves recognition. Her belief in my work touched me deeply. While Jason and others had encouraged me over the years, Liza's assessment carried different weights, she understood. Both craftsmanship and artistic expression from her academic perspective. I'll think about it. Good. And I've been invited to lead a workshop series at the Community Center Literature in Every Day. Life, the success of our reading Nook, apparently established me as an authority on practical applications of literary theory, as it should. You bridge those worlds naturally. Our conversation continued, mapping potential futures that somehow included continued collaboration. Her workshop series might benefit from custom-designed discussion tables, might incorporate elements inspired by literary themes. The elementary school was already discussing a potential outdoor reading garden for spring. By the time we finished our coffee, the initial emptiness had transformed into anticipation. The reading Nook's completion wasn't an ending, but a beginning, a proof of concept for what we could create together. Walking back toward Willow Lane, we passed Mrs. Bennett, watering her mums for the third time that day. She waved with exaggerated casualness, clearly hoping for details about the Nook opening. Eliza, in a rare moment of mischief, linked her arm through mine as we passed, sending Mrs. Bennet scurrying inside, presumably to update the Riverside community page with breaking news. That was unkind. Consider it community service, providing narrative development for our neighbors' entertainment. A playful moment underscored how our relationship had evolved from awkward, lawn-mowing neighbors to comfortable companions who could joke about the town's persistent interest in their connection. That evening, as I sketched ideas for an exhibition piece, a bookshelf that incorporated elements of the Reading Nook design, but with more artistic flourishes, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Heard the Nook opening was a smash hit. Town verdict, you two are Riverside's new power couple, combining brains and brawn. When's the wedding? I rolled my eyes, but found myself smiling.
Our wedding.
Just mutual respect and creative collaboration. His immediate response, boring answer. Try again with more romance. Instead of engaging with his teasing, I sent a photo of my exhibition piece sketch, asking for his thoughts on the design. The reply was unexpectedly serious. That's next level work. The professor's right. You need to show these. Later that night, I received another text, this one from Eliza. Andrew and Emma made it home safely. They both enjoyed meeting you. Andrew says you're surprisingly perfect for the Reading Nook collaboration. High praise from my analytical son, I responded. I enjoyed them as well. Emma wants garden updates and photos of the children using the Nook. Her final text of the evening shifted something in my chest. Family connections matter. Thank you for understanding that. The following weeks established new patterns in our relationship. With the Reading Nook operational and receiving enthusiastic reviews from students and teachers alike, Eliza and I found other ways to continue our creative partnership. I began designing pieces for her upcoming workshop series while she provided literary consultation for my exhibition submissions. We still met regularly for coffee, now discussing future possibilities rather than current projects. Interest in our relationship gradually normalized into acceptance of whatever category-defying connection we had formed. Mrs. Bennet still documented our coffee meetings and collaborative sessions, but with decreasing sensationalism. Even Jason stopped making wedding jokes, instead asking genuine questions about our latest creative endeavors. One crisp November evening, as leaves cascaded from the maples lining Willow Lane, Eliza invited me to dinner to discuss the workshop furniture concepts. I arrived to find her kitchen filled with delicious aromas and the dining table set with careful attention to detail. This seems more formal than a design discussion, I observed, noting the candles and wine glasses. It's a celebration, she explained, removing a roast from the oven. I received word today that my workshop series has been expanded to include neighboring communities. And she paused, eyes bright with excitement. The Portland Museum of Craft has expressed interest in featuring our Reading Nook design in their spring exhibition on functional educational spaces. That's remarkable, I said, genuinely impressed. Your workshop expansion is well-deserved, our Reading Nook, she emphasized, setting the roast on a trivet. They're interested in our collaborative approach as much as the final product. How literature and craftsmanship informed each other throughout the process, the emphasis on our resonated deeply. What had begun as separate skills applied to a shared project had evolved into something truly integrated, a creative partnership that produced work neither of us could have accomplished alone. Over dinner, we discussed the museum opportunity, the workshop expansion, and the furniture designs I was developing. The conversation flowed with the comfortable rhythm we had established. Moving between practical details and broader philosophical reflections, I've been thinking about what Emma said, Eliza remarked, as we moved to the living room with coffee, about the tangible results of your work compared to her legal advocacy. There's truth in that observation, but also an oversimplification. How so? I asked, settling into what had become my chair beside the newly organized bookshelves. Physical creations like the Reading Nook have immediate presence, yes, but their true impact unfolds over time, often invisibly. A child discovers a love of reading in that space, which leads to educational opportunities, which shapes their entire life trajectory. A visible object creates invisible ripples. Like teaching, I suggested, will shape minds, but can't always see the results. Exactly, she nodded, pleased with the parallel. What we build, whether with words or wood, extends beyond what we can measure or observe. That's why integrity in creation matters so deeply. Her insight captured something essential about our shared values, the commitment to quality craftsmanship. Whether in literature or carpentry, and the recognition that our work existed in both present and future tenses. As the evening progressed, our conversation shifted from professional matters to more personal reflections. Elisa spoke about her gradual emergence from grief following David's death, how the Reading Nook project had reconnected her to collaborative creativity. I shared my own journey from professional detachment to community engagement, how our partnership had changed my relationship with Riverside itself. We've been good for each other, she observed simply. We have, I agreed, in ways I never anticipated when I finally said yes to mowing your lawn. She smiled at the memory. My carefully maintained facade of lawn perfectionism, the first thing you've challenged with your carpentry joke and your dinner invitation. I'm tired of eating alone, the first genuine vulnerability you showed. The recognition of our journey hung in the comfortable silence between us, how far we had come from that initial reluctant lawn mowing. How many boundaries we had crossed together, how much we had built beyond physical structures. When I eventually prepared to leave, Eliza walked me to the door, as had become our custom. But tonight, she paused with her hand on the doorknob. The Portland Museum wants us both to speak at the exhibition opening, she said, about collaborative creation across disciplines. Would you be comfortable with that? The question carried. Multiple layers, professional, personal, public. It meant standing together before an audience of artisans and academics, articulating the unique partnership we had developed, defining for others what we had allowed to evolve organically between ourselves. With you as my co-presenter? I replied. Absolutely. Her smile conveyed understanding of all I hadn't articulated. Good, we'll prepare together, of course. Of course, I echoed. That's how we work best. Walking home beneath maple, trees shedding their autumn glory, I reflected on the extraordinary sequence of events that had unfolded from that Saturday morning lawn mowing. What had begun as a simple neighborly request had opened doors I hadn't known existed to creative collaboration, to community engagement, to a relationship that defied conventional categories, but enriched both our lives immeasurably. My phone buzzed with a text from Elisa. Andrew and Emma want to attend the museum exhibition opening. They're invested in our creative partnership. I smiled at the description. Creative partnership captured it perfectly, not defined by age or romantic expectations, but by shared vision and complementary strengths. I texted back, they're welcome additions to our supporting audience. Reaching my house, I paused to look back across Willow Lane. Eliza's lights glowed warmly in the autumn darkness, beacon of intellectual vitality and unexpected connection. Mrs. Bennett's curtains twitched predictably at her front window. Somewhere in town, Jason was probably crafting his next teasing text about our evening together. But none of that mattered compared to what Elisa and I had built. Not just a reading nook that would nurture young imaginations for years to come. Not just reorganized bookshelves or workshop furniture or exhibition pieces, but a bridge between different ways of creating meaning in the world. Between words and wood, theory and practice, solitude and connection. I entered my workshop, where sketches for the museum exhibition pieces covered my drafting table. Tomorrow, I would begin transforming those concepts into reality, knowing that Eliza would bring her literary perspective to the process, challenging and enhancing my craftsmanship as she had from the beginning. What had started with a reluctant yes to mowing her lawn had blossomed into an ongoing yes to creative possibility, to mutual growth, to a partnership that enriched not just our individual lives, but our community and beyond. The most beautiful creations, I had learned, often begin with the simplest invitations to mow a lawn, to stay for dinner, to build something together. And sometimes, the most meaningful connections form when we're tired of being alone, when we recognize in Another person the complementary pieces to our own incomplete puzzles. Eliza had invited me to dinner because she was tired of eating alone. In doing so, she had invited me into a richer life than I had imagined possible, one where solitary craftsmanship expanded into collaborative creation, or precision, and passion coexisted, where age differences and town gossip faded into irrelevance compared to the joy of building something meaningful together. As I switched on my workshop lights and ran my hand along the cedar board that would become part of our museum exhibition, I smiled at the thought of the journey ahead, not just to Portland for the opening, but into whatever creative territories Eliza and I would explore next. The beauty of our partnership lay in its openness to possibility, its freedom from predetermined paths. Like the reading nook we had created together, our connection had become a space where stories could unfold, where imagination could flourish, where different perspectives could coexist in harmony. And like all well-crafted things, it would only grow more meaningful with time, developing the rich patina that comes from genuine care and attention. The next morning, as I began work on the exhibition pieces, my phone chimed with a text from Eliza. The first class used the reading nook. Yesterday afternoon, the librarian reports complete engagement, even from the reluctant readers. We built something that works, Nathan, something that matters. I paused in my sawing to reply. The best kind of success, measured in engagement rather than applause. Her response came quickly. Exactly. Though the museum exhibition might provide both, I smiled, setting down my phone to continue working on what would become our next shared creation. Outside, the maples of Willow Lane released their leaves in a gentle cascade. Nature's reminder that sometimes the most beautiful transformations require letting go of preconceptions, of solitary habits, of the barriers we build around our specialized domains. Elisa and I had let go of these limitations, stepping instead into a collaborative space where literature and craftsmanship, academia and practical skill, structure and story could interact freely. The reading nook was just the first manifestation of what such boundary crossing could produce.